Coming up today, President Park Geun-hye expresses her disappointment that North Korea cancelled UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon's scheduled trip to an inter-Korean factory park just north of the border. The White House says it has no reason to believe North Korea's claims that it has the ability to miniaturize nuclear warheads. First, President Park slams Japan's move to enlist wartime industrial facilities as UNESCO World Heritage Sites. She makes her feelings clear to the visiting chief of the UN agency. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello to our viewers around the world. It's 6 a.m. on Thursday, May 21st here in Seoul. Thanks, as always, for joining us. I'm Mark Broome. Our top story this morning. President Park Geun-hye has expressed regret over North Korea's sudden cancellation of UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon's visit to the two Koreas jointly run Kaesong Industrial Complex. According to the presidential office of Cheongwade, during her meeting with Ban at her office on Wednesday, President Park said she had hoped the UN chief's visit to the complex would provide a breakthrough for the current situation and improve inter-Korean ties. She, however, added that although Kaesong is facing a difficult situation after Pyongyang unilaterally demanded a pay raise for its workers, the South Korean government will maintain its principle of resolving that issue only through consultation between the two sides. In response, the UN chief, while calling the North's move to suddenly reverse its stance deeply regrettable, said he will push for the trip again when an appropriate time comes in the future. Now, the US government says it does not believe North Korea has the ability to build nuclear warheads small enough to sit atop ballistic missiles, refuting such claims from Pyongyang. A spokesman for the White House's National Security Council, Patrick Ventrell, told Seoul-based Yonhap news agency on Wednesday that Washington does not believe North Korea has reached that capacity yet. This echoes the assessment from Seoul's defense ministry that said the North is not capable of miniaturizing nuclear warheads and warned that Pyongyang should immediately halt all provocations that breach UN Security Council resolutions. This all came after a statement on Wednesday in which Pyongyang's National Defense Commission said that it had hit this milestone long ago and warned the world not to challenge its, quote, righteous efforts to fortify its defense capabilities. And to counter these threats coming from North Korea, a senior US military official says Washington is considering the permanent deployment of a US missile defense system to South Korea. But Seoul says it will only start weighing its options after Washington submits a formal deployment request. Our Kim Hyun-bin reports.
Frank Rose, the U.S. Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Defense Policy and Verification Operations, said that Washington is weighing the costs and benefits of deploying the Terminal High Altitude Area Defense System, also known as THAAD, to South Korea, but stressed the final decision has not yet been made. Rose, who made the remarks Tuesday at a security seminar in Washington, said THAAD is a purely defensive system that will improve the Allies' ability to intercept incoming short and mid-range missiles from North Korea. In response, South Korea's presidential office said that the government will assess the pros and cons and come to a decision if the U.S. makes a formal deployment request. Admiral James Winfield, the U.S. Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, says if the two countries engage in talks, Washington will approach the issue with discretion and respect Korea's decision.
And it goes without saying that the ROK will have to want to have this system in place, or we simply won't put it there.
The potential deployment is a thorny issue in and outside of South Korea. Both China and Russia have voiced opposition, calling it a threat to their national security. Responding to their concerns, Rose said it does not and cannot impact broader strategic stability for either country. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
Now, the Korean War ended with an armistice, not an official peace treaty, and that fact isn't felt by most people going about their daily lives here in South Korea, but for the country's 82nd Battalion, it's the backbone of their daily life. Our Na Hyung-young has a story.
This is one of the most heavily guarded borders on Earth, a clear reminder of the 7-decade-long division of the peninsula. This underground tunnel, dug by North Korean troops, is one of 4 discovered in the 1970s. The two Koreas are still technically at war, which is why South Korean men still do about 2 years of mandatory military service. With North Korea claiming to have miniaturized nuclear weapons and its reportedly successful test of a submarine-launched ballistic missile, the Korean peninsula is a little more tense than usual. The South Korean military must be ready to fight at all times, which means practicing wartime scenarios.
The 82nd Tank Battalion pride themselves in being the nation's best battalion. About 300 soldiers are stationed here, and they conduct this kind of exercise twice a year to boost military readiness.
More than 30 tanks, including K-1s, recovery, and commanding tanks, have been mobilized for this drill, taking place near the 82nd's garrison. The training focuses on enhancing team cooperation, making sure soldiers in a tank understand and effectively carry out the roles of each position.
The tank gunnery training improved our firing. I'm confident that our unit, even as of now, is capable of working together to fulfill any kind of mission.
Visitors and even locals often forget they're in a potential war zone. But they should remember that with rigorous training, South Korea's military is prepared to defend the nation against any possibility. Na Hyun-kyung, Arirang News.
Now, during the Korean War, the United States dispatched the largest number of troops among the 21 UN member nations who committed themselves to supporting South Korea and suffered the greatest loss of life during the conflict. Now, some of the relatives of the American soldiers who died in the war but whose remains were never found are in Korea this week to attend ceremonies honoring their loved ones. Connie Kim has the story.
Not a day goes by that Sheila Batsioch doesn't think about her father. She's now 65 years old, but she still thinks about the day 64 years ago when he died. Staff Sergeant Joseph Doherty was shot down around Chodo Island in North Korean territory in waters over the Yellow Sea. He is one of thousands of men still missing in action.
He was in the Korean conflict on October 23, 1951. He was shot down on what's called Black Tuesday, which is the day that there was a huge loss of Air Force personnel that day.
Batsioch is one of 49 people invited to Korea this week by the Ministry of Patriots and Veterans Affairs.
To remember and honor those who have made the ultimate sacrifice during the Korean War, South Korea has invited dozens of families of brave servicemen who have yet to return to their home soil.
The group attended a ceremony at Imjingak on Wednesday, where a memorial to Korean War veterans was erected in 1975.
Although this ceremony, honoring the sacrifices of the missing war dead, is long overdue, it is important to acknowledge their sacrifices and achievements. But it is extremely regrettable that we haven't yet found the remains of the missing.
An estimated 54,000 U.S. soldiers are known to have died during the Korean War. Close to 8,000 are still unaccounted for. At the ceremony, the families experienced a rush of emotion when they were given pictures of their relatives from when they fought in the war. Many said it's given them a certain amount of closure to see the place where their relatives fought and to know what they were fighting for.
I wanted a little bit of closure. I also wanted to know what he died for. You know, he's missing in action. He's still missing in action. But I wanted to see what it was he died for. And this trip has been wonderful.
Connie Kim, Arirang News, Paju.
President Park Geun-hye has condemned Japan's bid to enlist its wartime industrial facilities as UNESCO World Heritage Sites, saying the move only creates conflict with the nations that suffered so terribly under Japanese colonial rule. The Korean leader made the remarks in a meeting with UNESCO chief Arirang on Wednesday, saying it goes against the spirit of the body to acknowledge facilities where many Koreans were made to do forced labor as a prestigious heritage site. Bokova, on her part, promised to convey President Park's message to the UNESCO heritage panels while encouraging Seoul and Tokyo to communicate with each other to resolve the issue. It is the first time that the president has directly mentioned Japan's UNESCO heritage bid, whose result will be announced during a World Heritage Committee session in Germany, scheduled for early July. A state-run think tank has released a grim outlook for the Korean economy, slashing this year's growth projection to 3% from the previous outlook of 3.5%. The Korea Development Institute says, however, that 3% is only achievable if the government carries out planned structural reforms and the central bank makes additional rate cuts. If all these measures don't happen, the KDI says the growth projection could fall even further to below 3%. The Institute says domestic demand may be gradually improving, but warns the country's slowing exports may hinder those increases. And while Korean exports struggle in the face of slowing major economies like China, conditions at home aren't looking particularly promising either, especially as the government struggles to push through structural reforms. And those challenges are mounting as Japan makes headway on its sluggish growth. Geunhye has the details.
Finance Minister Choi Kyung-hwan called for the fast implementation of economic reforms, such as a long-delayed update to the civil service pensions, in order for Korea's economy to recover at an acceptable pace. At a regular meeting with economic ministers Wednesday, Choi outlined how Japan has been getting its economy on track by easing regulations in the agriculture, medical, services, tourism, and other sectors. Since Korea and Japan share many socio-economic similarities, he said there may be some way to use the neighbor as a benchmark.
If we don't handle our problems properly, we may face a situation where Japan speeds ahead and South Korea crawls behind.
Choi also stressed the importance of tackling youth unemployment, saying the future of Korea's economy largely depends on young people. Korea and Japan's youth unemployment rates are diverging, as Japan's numbers have been improving since the second half of 2013. Experts say the shift is connected to Japan's reshoring trend, in which a growing number of Japanese companies that had production bases abroad are returning home, creating more jobs in the domestic manufacturing sector. But in Korea, the opposite is happening, as big-name companies are expanding overseas production.
In Korea, labor and land costs are quite high, meaning Japan's policies do not work in Korea's economic environment.
In Korea, the so-called wage peak system may be a more effective way to create more jobs for young people. The finance minister called for its swift adoption on Wednesday. Geunhye, Arirang News.
Now, the US Federal Reserve says June is too early to begin raising interest rates. According to the minutes of the Federal Open Market Committee's meeting late last month, but that just came out on Wednesday local time, members were divided over the health of the US economy, but most agreed that June was too soon to raise rates from near zero for the first time since the 2008 global financial crisis. However, the signs are suggesting they aren't planning on waiting too much longer, as a rebound is still expected. A recent poll of analysts showed that most think the Fed will start hiking rates in September. Back here in Korea, and the two main rival parties have agreed to continue negotiations on a contentious bill to reform the pension system for public servants, and they aim to pass this new bill by May 28th, next Thursday. The agreement was reached at a meeting at the National Assembly on Wednesday between the chief pension reform policymakers of the ruling Saenuri Party and the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy. The civil servant pension reform bill has been in limbo since early this month, when the presidential office rejected the party's original agreement to link the bill to reforms to the much larger national pension system that would raise national pension payouts by 10%. Now on to the latest in the high-profile bribery list scandal here in Korea, and prosecutors decided not to detain former Prime Minister Lee Wang-gu or Governor Hong Jun-pyo of South Gyeongsangnam-do province, saying there's not enough evidence to prove they were directly involved in trying to coax witnesses into changing their testimony, as had been alleged. But prosecutors added that their investigation into the bribery charges goes on, saying an indictment decision for the pair will be made today, on Thursday. Now, Hong and Lee are facing charges of receiving bribes from late businessman Song Wan-jong, the former chairman of Gyeongnam Enterprises. Well, those are the stories we have for you on this Thursday morning here in Seoul. For more of the latest, don't forget to check out our website, arirang.co.kr/news, and do download our smartphone application as well. Have a wonderful day. Goodbye.